Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the actual mechanics of English sentence structures. Instead of just dusting off those dry old grammar rules, we're going to explore how English really flows, how it functions, and how it communicates time and action. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, let's dive into this. The verb is absolutely not just a grammatical placeholder. As our source material elegantly points out, the verb is literally the lifeblood of a sentence. It is the beating heart that makes your words actually work. I mean, think about it. Without a verb, you just have a bunch of static nouns sitting there doing nothing. But the second you add a verb, boom, you create action, you create time, you create life.
To really see why mastering this lifeblood matters, I've got a quick challenge for you. Listen to this. In my dream, a snake slithered along the side of my bed and slips quickly onto my pillow. Did you catch it? There's this slight mental hiccup right at the end. That jarring shift from the past tense, slithered, to the present tense, slips, it totally breaks the heartbeat of the sentence. When you lose control of the verb, you immediately create confusion for your reader.
So here is our quick roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the sentence's lifeblood, time travel and main tenses, actions in progress, avoiding those awkward tense shifts, active versus passive voice, and finally, the true power of passive writing.
All right, part 1, the sentence's lifeblood.
So to truly understand the heartbeat of our sentences, we really need to look at the anatomy first. Every single regular verb tense in English stems from a foundational root system of just 4 parts. Just as a quick refresher, we have the basic form like jump. Then there's the past tense form, jumped. Third is the present participle, which we use for continuing action, that's your jumping. And finally, the past participle, which for regular verbs looks exactly like the past tense, jumped, but it gets paired with helping verbs like have or has. Mastering these 4 basic roots is what allows you to build absolutely any sentence structure.
Moving right along to part 2, time travel with main tenses.
Building on those roots we just talked about, verbs basically act as literal time machines across 6 main stops in our landscape. They tell us exactly when an action occurs on the clock. You've got your simple tenses, present, past, and future. Think, I jump, I jumped, I will jump. Simple enough, right? Then we have the perfect tenses, present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. We form these by grabbing those past participles and slapping on helping verbs like have or had. And what these do is describe actions that are fully completed relative to another specific point in time.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is a fascinating little exception called the historical present. Sometimes, believe it or not, we use the present tense to describe something that has already happened. We do this to make a past action from literature, a formal report, or maybe a famous quote feel much more vivid. Because a quote in a text is considered unchangeable and quote-unquote permanently true, we say things like, "Revenge, says the Lord," instead of "said." It yanks the past right into the present moment.
Now, when looking at the future tense, you might have wondered, hey, what exactly is the difference between will and shall? Well, in modern usage, it's actually quite distinct. Will is your standard go-to for ordinary future events, like we will go out tonight. Shall, on the other hand, that's the heavy muscle. It expresses a strict demand, which is why you see it constantly in laws, strict policies, and contracts. Invigilators shall ensure rules are implemented. It operates as a hard mandate, not just a casual prediction.
Mapping these perfect tenses out on a timeline really helps visualize them as completed actions. So, past perfect means the action was entirely finished before another past action happened. For example, Marina had worked in TV before she joined the company. See? One happened before the other. Present perfect means the action started in the past, but it actually touches the present moment. Marina has worked at a number of jobs over the year. And future perfect, that means it will be completely done before a specific future deadline. Contractors will have completed the block by the end of the year.
All right, part 3, actions in progress.
So what if the action isn't just a single point in time, but it's actively unfolding? Well, this is exactly where the progressive tenses operate. We take that ing present participle we talked about earlier, and we pair it with a be helping verb. And get this, the shift across time happens so smoothly just by altering that one helping verb. Check it out. Marina is working today, Marina was working yesterday, Marina will be working tomorrow. The core action just stays in progress, gliding effortlessly across the timeline.
Let's move on to part 4, avoiding awkward tense shifts.
Remember our snake example from the beginning? Shifting tenses without a real actual change in time totally breaks the sentence's heartbeat. So let's do a quick interactive challenge. Can you spot the shift here? He came home early because he wasn't feeling well, then he discovers his wife had the door key. Okay, so the action is anchored solidly in the past with came, wasn't feeling, and had. But there's a really jarring word in there that totally interrupts the flow. Did you catch it?
Yep, it's the word discovers. It abruptly yanks us into the present tense for absolutely no reason at all. Actually, scratch that. It just confuses the whole timeline. The corrected version simply uses discovered. By maintaining that consistent past tense, the narrative stays perfectly intact and your reader stays engaged without getting a grammatical whiplash. So, the golden rule of thumb here, only shift your tenses when the time of the action actually changes.
Which brings us to part 5, active versus passive voice.
So, the crucial point is that verbs also have this amazing property called voice, which establishes direction and flow. Voice basically tells us who is doing what. In the active voice, the subject of your sentence is the one actually out there performing the action. But in the passive voice, the subject is just sitting there receiving the action. This example brilliantly illustrates the difference. In the active sentence, the estate management will prosecute trespassers. The management, which is our subject, is the one doing the prosecuting. They're doing the work. But when we invert this to the passive version, trespassers will be prosecuted. Suddenly, the trespassers become the subject. They aren't actually doing anything, right? Rather, they are receiving the action of being prosecuted. It fundamentally alters the entire focus of the statement.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 6, the power of passive.
A lot of people think passive voice is inherently bad, but building a passive sentence is actually a brilliant strategic communication tool. Let's look at its anatomy step by step so you can construct one effortlessly. First, you take the object from an active sentence and promote it. Bam! It becomes your new passive subject. Second, you add a tense of the be verb, like is, was, or will be. Third, drop in the past participle of your main verb. And finally, the original doer of the action becomes the agent, usually introduced by the word by, or you can just omit them entirely.
And honestly, that omission is where the real superpower lies. Sometimes the absolute most powerful thing you can do as a writer is to remove the doer of the action completely. You can drop the agent when their identity is already completely understood, like the president has been reelected. We all know the voters did it, right? You drop it when the identity is unimportant, like newscasts are translated. It really doesn't matter by who. Or you drop it when the doer is entirely unknown, like an error has been made in the computer.
So, why would you strategically choose to use the passive voice? It's all about focus and tone, my friends. You use it to create a highly objective or impersonal tone, which is exactly why you see it constantly in science, business, and news reporting. You can also use it to intentionally remove responsibility from yourself, saying mistakes were made instead of I made a mistake. Classic move. Or you use it to focus all of the reader's attention purely on a grand discovery or the receiver, rather than on the person who actually performed the action.
It really is all about choices. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. When you sit down to write your very next email, your next report, or your next essay, are your verbs merely following the basic rules? Or are you strategically directing the lifeblood of your message? By controlling time and commanding voice, you control exactly what your reader sees, feels, and understands. Get out there and make those senses come alive. Thanks for joining this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.